Okay, what I'm going to do here is go through the description of the composer ISFP in David Keirsey's book, Please Understand Me Too, and talk a little bit about how things from that apply to my life individually. So if you're not interested in that, then you can skip this one. So I'm just going to start out by reading part of it and then kind of talk about how I relate to that. And I probably won't. I'm not going to read every word of the description. Just parts I think that I can actually come up with something about on the spot. So, although ISFPs excel in what are called the fine arts, composing must not be thought of as only writing music, but as bringing into synthesis any aspect of the world of the senses. More than the other artisans, composers have a sure grasp of what fits and what doesn't fit in any and all kinds of artistic works. And so when an especially gifted painter, sculptor, choreographer, film director, songwriter, playwright, poet, novelist, chef, decorator, or fashion designer shows up, he or she is likely an ISFP. So already, he's starting off with listing some careers and occupations. And I think this is already where some people don't like personality type descriptions to talk about careers and occupations like that, because they feel like, well, if they look at that and a person is not one of those particular occupations, then it somehow doesn't fit them. But the point, of course, is not that everybody of this type fits into that, but that just is a common tendency of people of my personality type. And he'll get into that a little later, but I wanted to say that right off the bat because it seems to be the biggest problem people have with Keirsey's descriptions, especially, is that he focuses on what people actually do, which to me is the best part of it, but it can cause people to think, if there are specific actions that he's describing that don't seem to relate to everybody, that he's stereotyping everybody as having to be a particular thing, which to me it's obvious isn't true, but some people seem to have a problem with that. Anyway, so he says, like all the artisans, they are concrete in their communication and utilitarian in their use of tools. They are interested in learning about arts and crafts, are preoccupied with technique, and work well with equipment. In orientation, they tend to be hedonistic, optimistic, cynical, and focused on the here and now. They want to be seen as artistic, audacious, and adaptable. Often excited, they trust their impulses, yearn for impact, seek sensation, prize generosity, and aspire to virtuosity. Intellectually, they are prone to practice tactics far more than logistics, strategy, and especially diplomacy. Further, with their friendly nature, they tend to play the informative role of entertainer more comfortably than the tough-minded directive role of operator. And with their quiet reserve, they prefer playing the part of a composer than a performer. And the deal with that is, he groups ISFPs and ESFPs together in a group that he calls entertainers, and then within that he has, the performer being the extroverted version and the composer being the introverted version, which makes a lot of sense to me as I think about my own life, because I have done plenty of performing, and it's always been, and he actually talks some more about this in Brains and Careers, kind of the most recent book that he's written, that everybody sort of has kind of, rather than, you're one personality type, but in a sense, if you're looking at it in terms of the roles that you fit into in life, he talks about intelligent roles and careers and occupations and things that people fit into, that you sort of have one primary spot, but then you sort of have like secondary and, even beyond that, sort of a tier of elements. And, his point in Brains and Careers is that the closer that what you do for a living or what you primarily do with your life, the closer it is to what your instinctual strengths are, usually the better you're going to do that particular job or activity, and usually the more you're going to enjoy it. And it doesn't mean that someone is locked into a particular career or way of life based on what their type is. It just means that there's going to be certain advantages because of that. So, and the further away you get from that, the more difficult it is to do that, whatever task that is, and the more challenging it is, the more you have to kind of go against instincts and natural skills and have to work much harder to kind of adapt to it. So it's not an absolute thing, and I've said this lots of times, that the whole deal with personality types is it doesn't describe absolutes, it describes tendencies and patterns of tendencies. And so if you look at something as being black and white, either or, one line of a description says, something like, well, like this goes on to say something about being interested in nature and animals. Well, I'm sure that there's ISFP types out there. There's people that don't particularly care about animals, but everything else might fit. And they might read that one line and say, well, that doesn't apply to me. I don't really care about animals. And it doesn't write off the rest of it just because that one thing doesn't seem to apply. So anyway, when I think about the primary and secondary role, as you could say, being an entertainer, the composition part of it always has been sort of my primary mode of operation. Creating things has always been what I've done the best and what I've been the most interested in. Now, I've usually enjoyed performing also, but it doesn't come as naturally to me. It's had to be something that I developed over time, and it's enjoyable, but it takes more effort on my part than the composing does, but less effort than something like, something involving strategic planning or any of the other roles he talks about, architecture or counseling, or all these other various things that a role that you could have in life. Those are all going to require much more effort on my part than performing would, but it requires more effort than composing. So that's kind of the point he's making there, and I agree. And as I look at my life, I can see plenty of instances of that, and I'm going to talk more about that a little bit later. But I'm going to go ahead and make that in another part. So this first part of this topic will come to a close with that. And if you're interested in hearing more, then feel free to go on to the next one.